Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Jensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We've got 5 members, 5 questions, and 5 answers for each question. Questions are generated by each squad member and run from the mindful to the mindless. Let's do a roll call.
Hey everyone, Gina Martin. I'm an assistant professor at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater.
Hi, Steph Martyr here. I am a doctoral candidate at Kent State University, practicing clinical counselor and co-host of Grad School Deconstructed.
Hi, everybody. Elliott Ingersoll, professor of counseling at Cleveland State University and host of Apply Topically.
Jenn Cook, associate professor, New England College.
It's been a while since we've been together. We tried to pull a show together the last couple of weeks, and either we ran into things like Easter or other sorts of things. So it's good to have everybody back, and hopefully we can continue a roll to get things going. What's everybody been up to? Anything surprising or new over the last 4 weeks?
I'm working on. I'm playing in the orchestra pit for a Hudson Players production of The Bikinis. A lot of good Motown songs, and I get to play electric bass. And there's a disco medley, and my heart is just leaping.
Oh boy. And we live close enough where I have no excuse for not seeing that.
You want to see this?
Except I really want hearing and sight after, for the rest of my life. So
it's not allowed.
I think he's saying it'll make him go deaf and blind if he indulges in such a production.
Oh, that would be Tommy, the rock opera. We're not doing that.
So what? Anything else new with anybody? Nothing new at my end.
I don't know, Gina. Is that okay? I got to teach a class, give a lecture for Gina's class a couple of weeks ago. So that was just really fun. That was fun in my life and new.
It was also fun in my life. It was wonderful to have you there.
What was the topic, or what was the area? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
And Gina, you're getting to the end of your first year as a full-fledged assistant professor. We're about to celebrate the 1-year mark for you, huh?
Yes. I actually just a couple days ago celebrated 1 year of being Dr. Gina Martin, which is exciting. And
congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. And in other news, we bought a leaf blower today.
Yeah. Why leave the neighborhood to peace and quiet when you could have a leaf blower? I totally understand that.
Are your seasons off in Wisconsin? Because when I lived there, fall came around September or October, not April.
Yes. Well, we have left everything on the ground since October. So we have quite a bit of leaf waste to dig ourselves out of. But now we have a wonderful leaf blower that will disturb everyone in the neighborhood. So it'll be good.
I understand the best time to blow leaves is around 7:00 in the morning. I think your neighbors would appreciate that if you did it then.
On a Sunday.
Yes.
I wish my neighbors would listen to this podcast.
Because they would want to be up at 7:30 and blow the leaves, or
It might let them realize like that's not appreciated by everyone. We've gotten used to it though. Now it's kind of like, all right, blowing snow or the leaves. It's either one pretty much all the time.
Winter is so quiet around here. That's what I love about winter. It's quiet. And then summer comes, you got leaf blowers, you've got motorcycles, you've got all sorts of stuff to kick up the noise. You got dogs outside barking because in the winter they're inside and they're not barking. So it's just a crazy assault of sound. So yeah, anyways, Gina, first year is paper anniversary. So you also get the first question for tonight.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be looking forward to lots of paper gifts in the near future. So speaking of gifts, what does your birthday celebration or tradition look like? And has it changed over the years?
Yes, it's changed over the years. I'm going to start with answering that part first. In our family, one tradition that we have for everybody that actually has continued as long as I've been aware is that we call and we sing the birthday song, which is the happy birthday. But once you sing it to the person, you go, happy birthday to you. And you have to do the little harmonizing thing at the end. That's just something in our family. Like, we will skip through sometimes if we're leaving messages like happy birthday to you, and you'll just, but more in tune. But that's what it would be like. Now for my birthday, we spend it in Hilton Head. Not that it's my birthday in Hilton Head. It's just that's when my family happens to be in South Carolina and my birthday falls over that. But it's nice. It's nice to be there, except for the fact that I'm away from everybody else. But it's something that we have just been doing now for the last few years. And when I was younger, we would always go to the powerhouse in the flats of Cleveland. It was this redone powerhouse and they had all these restaurants inside and it was super cool. And there was a TGI Fridays. And when you're 10 years old, you think TGI Fridays is like the neatest thing ever. And it had an arcade in the basement. So go get your chicken tenders at TGI Fridays and then go play arcade games until, you were done. So that's what it used to be. So now it's a much more adult subdued kind of thing.
Yeah, it's changed a bit. I think when my partner and I had kids, that was kind of like, well, the kids' birthdays were the thing. And it was like, and I was like, on my birthday, my mom would make a cake and we'd have a nice dinner. And that was the party. And then, my partner is like Generation X and she's like, oh no, you gotta have a bigger party than that. And my daughter always liked, a bigger party. My son was kind of, he'd like to have friends overnight. But that kind of took away from the adult birthdays. And so only in the last couple of years, when I hit 59 and 60, we had some friends and family over and just kind of laid back, but it was really nice. And that was all I really wanted, was just hanging out with people, but I think as the kids get older, that's what's kind of led us back into, oh, well, okay. Like my partner, for their birthday, we'll probably go there's a place called the Inn at Honey Run down in Southern Ohio. Nice place. But it's just like, yeah, that's kind of picked back up since the kids have gotten older. So,
well, my birthday is in February, which means that I always got cupcakes at school or some kind of treat, for my birthday.
What day in February, Jen?
I'm the 11th.
Oh, okay. I was just checking. Make sure you weren't a Groundhog Day baby.
No, I'm close to Valentine's, which means, people are really more interested in that holiday. So like if they run close together toward the weekend, then there was no like going out for your birthday, like even as an adult, because it's jammed with the Valentine's crowd. So as an adult, though, the jammed with the Valentine's crowd. And it feels a little bit not exactly the same, but the people who have their birthday on Christmas Eve and people are like, here's a gift for Christmas and for your birthday or a card or whatever, like a lot of times my birthday goes by the wayside because people are into Valentine's and not so much into birthdays. I don't really have any traditions per se, I would say as adult, except going to work because like, let's be honest, like 3/4 of my birthdays are going to fall on a work day. So, because my birthday's in February. So although it was a privilege as a kid, because, those poor summer birthday people, you never got cupcakes at school. Or my mom made these mad popcorn balls one time when I was in preschool when I was 4. I still remember them. They were like strawberry flavored. They were really badass, but yeah, it's not so cool as an adult. I'm out.
I never had a birthday celebration when I was a child that I can actually remember. People say that I paint this picture of woe and dreary, childhood that I had. Aileen always says that to me when I tell her about what went on in my child. She goes, "Oh no, that's not possible. You sure you had birthday celebration? I'm sure your Christmas celebration was not as droll and terrible as you say it is." Well, my sister's still alive and we talk to her every week. And my wife checked it out and my sister is like, yeah, that's pretty much how it was, to kind of confirm these stories. My mother was a child of the Depression, so we tried to keep things real simple. My birthday was close to Thanksgiving, sort of like Jen's close to Valentine's Day. So my sister's is close to Thanksgiving too. We're couple of weeks, 7 days apart, something like that, 10 days apart. And so we often combined all three. So all the relatives would come over after a day of my mother cooking, and the side piece was my birthday or my sister's birthday or both of us. And there weren't, I think, any traditions. And also because it was the winter, at least this is how I remember it, it was the time of the year where a lot of relatives died. So, I can see Jenn is laughing. Unfortunately, you can't see this, but Jenn is losing it. And maybe her relatives died in February. I don't know. But my recollection is we had a lot of loss in our family at that time, whether it gets cold, people, so and so. So I just remember a lot of that just being screwed up as a kid. And then, I married Aileen, and she came from a family with all sorts of birthday traditions. So it's changed dramatically. There are presents, and that's a real portion of what we do. But you get to choose your meal, and you get to choose what you want to do on that day. And you don't have to do squat as far as chores around the house. And that was true for us and true for our kids. And so, she's helped build a tradition around that in our family. And so it's a much more joyous occasion. And so far, nobody that I know has died around my birthday. So maybe it's karma.
Well, that sounds pretty miserable. Yeah, I don't have anything. I thought I was going to be the one who brings us dreary, but
I was thinking that sounded just fine to me, but yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, don't mean to butt in, but
yeah. And by the way, Elliott was laughing about death too. It was not just me. I just want all the listeners to know that I am not the only one laughing at death. Like, he was wiping his eyes. He was laughing so hard. So for the record.
It's true. Fair enough. We share a sense of the macabre.
So no one is fully guiltless here on that front. But my birthday, the reason that I asked this question is because mine is different every year. My birthday falls at a time where it's in the summer, and everyone always seems to be celebrating something else at the exact same time. So every year we either have weddings, or we have to travel, or we haven't had funerals yet, Marty, but now I'm thinking that might be in my future. I don't know. But we're always traveling that weekend. And some people are like really nice, and like they feel kind of bad that like, oh, we're getting married on your birthday, so like here's a small cake or something like that to try to like make up for it. But really the only tradition that I have stuck to over the years, with life being crazy with weddings and stuff like that, was the free Starbucks drink every birthday. Wherever I am, there's usually a Starbucks there. So we had a birthday one of my birthdays in California. We had one of them in Florida. We had one of them in Iowa. We've been traveling all over, and all of those places have Starbucks. So I always get the free drink on my birthday to kick the day off. And then whatever will be, will be. And that's how it goes.
I can kind of relate as far as everybody having something else going on. Just for that for a second, because my birthday is in the December 21st area. So in general, like, I'm kind of grateful now about what we do, because otherwise I just hear everybody saying that they can't come celebrate or do anything because they all have Christmas plans or something. What's the funniest thing you've ever read in a textbook?
So yeah, okay. Didn't have a lot of time to go over these in advance, and I wish I had, just to get the book. But I've been reading a couple of books that look at the bases of postmodern theory, as opposed to modernism. And I came across a quote. I'm going to paraphrase it here, but I can provide a footnote and we can put it in the notes if listeners send cards and letters. But it was Johann Fichte. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He's a German philosopher, late 19th, early 20th century. But he was entranced by Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who I have very little use for. I think he lived in his head and never dealt with another human being, because you read this stuff and you're like, you've got to be out of your... Anyway, Fichte was saying that the best way to educate children was in a nationalist sense of the state being the greater good. And this is where the idea of the Volk came from in National Socialism. It really drove a lot of it. But it's been really helpful to me, because I'm reading it and I'm like, this guy would never have gotten published in the late 20th, early 21st century. And then I go back and I dig deeper, and all the philosophers, it's just like such a bunch of shite. They come up with their own presuppositions and they say, oh, this is the way this is. And I'm like, oh, you should sacrifice yourself to the state, and the state is the greater good, and you can actually trust the state. What the heck? That to me was ironic, disturbing, and of course I find the disturbing funny. So that's my answer.
You totally went the outrageous route. I mean, I was thinking to myself, I was like, if you asked me like what were the most outrageous things you've ever read in a textbook, I've got a running list. And, I raise pretty critical students. And so they're always pointing out things that are completely outrageous. So nothing was standing out to me as like immediately that was funny. But I do remember studying for the NCE and the CPCE and reading the Encyclopedia of Counseling. Anyone who used this as a study guide, I'm sorry, but Rosenthal is maybe one of the most hilarious people I've ever read in my life. Like, I mean, it is such a subtle, dry sense of humor, but it's stuck in my brain. And I thought to myself, and this is, I'm going to get a PhD and go be a counselor educator. I thought to myself, if this guy would have taught my classes using these kinds of examples and speaking in this kind of way, I wouldn't even need this dumb book at this point in time, because it would stick in my brain. So I have to say, like, this is kind of a tangent to the question, but like his humor and his ability to like infuse that as part of the educational process of studying for comps in the NCE, that really had an effect on me and how I teach, because I think that stuff stays with a lot of people. Like when there is a humorous bent to it and you can remember it based on a really dry joke, you're good to go. Like you sit down, you read the test question, and all of a sudden the funny joke is popping into your head. And the whole book is full of them. I mean, I don't recommend anyone run out tonight and just reread the Encyclopedia of Counseling for the humor aspects. But if you have to study for the exam, I found it enjoyable.
I had a tough time with this question because first it meant that you actually have to read textbooks to find something funny. But I immediately settled on, I think the funniest thing I ever read that was academic was The Power Tactics of Jesus Christ and Other Essays by Jay Haley. And it's in the second edition, and the edition that I have is the second, and he writes in on the side, or someone writes in on the side, Second Coming edition. It's got great essays in it that really provoke your thinking. Now, Haley, of course, is a very kind of directive therapist, and so he doesn't think too much of psychoanalysis. So chapters like, and I say chapters, they're like 14 pages. The Art of Psychoanalysis, where he takes a shot at psychoanalysis. The Power Tactics of Jesus Christ, the title essay, which is about, trying to engage sort of a mass thinking around ideas and how that works. The Art of Being Schizophrenic uses some dated concepts from schizophrenia, but still a lot of fun. The Art of Being a Failure as a Therapist, I think, is a very brief essay, and it's good. Basically, he's taking a shot at non-directive therapy. How to Have an Awful Marriage is another fine little chapter. And so, yeah, there's some great stuff in there. Provocative, tongue-in-cheek, Jay Haley.
So speaking of Jay Haley, mine comes from a family and marriage textbook. So I was recently course prepping for my marriage and family course that I'm teaching. And this was honestly, I went back and forth with this because it wasn't funny in the moment. It was more devastating and like personally wrecking than anything else. It wasn't even something that I read. It was a graph, and I wish everyone could see me, but it was like a steady line of couples' happiness. And so it showed that couples, when they first form, they're very happy and things are good. And then there's a dip in the chart when they have their first child. Yes. And then when they have their second child, it dips even lower. And it's like, this is the lowest point for all married couples ever. Do not go here. It was really very direct. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I just read that? And I reread it again. And as someone in a marriage with one child, I'm like, okay, that's all I need to know.
So this question came because as I was reading Watson Stenner doing Q methodological research, I think I could speak right. There's a microphone. So it's talking about importance of the third dimension factors as viewpoints. And it talks like it follows that the extraction of more than three factors renders the space more than three-dimensional or multidimensional. Mathematicians and physicists refer to it as Hilbert space. But since this whole idea is mind-numbing and impossible to visualize, let's say no more about it. Read that a couple months ago. Yeah.
That was great. No, yeah, I can see where that would definitely stick in your mind because, yeah, all right, well, good for that author, right?
I think I put that line in many a blue book in college. Let's say nothing more about it.
Yeah.
Done.
Well, I guess we're moving from the somewhat academic to the somewhat leisure time. What films have you watched and enjoyed that you normally would have passed on?
Well, I think I have a well-established history of staying away from anything that is science fiction, fantasy, in another realm, in the future, all that kind of stuff. However, when I was working at a job for several years back in early 2000s, there was a Hollywood Video by me. Yep. I had that unlimited membership. And there were only so many movies on DVD at the time. And I was in a really not a great job. I hated this job, it was just like sucking my soul. So every night when I'd get off work, I would go to Hollywood with my unlimited card to get videos, and I'd start running out of things to rent, of course, because I'd watched everything in the store. So I happened upon Being John Malkovich, which, let me just say, this is totally outside my comfort zone. This is not the kind of movie that I would ever pick up to watch. But given that I was out of movies at that point, I was like, well, it's in. This was a thing, folks. I'm looking at Gina. This was a thing. The movie would have to be in, there was only a certain number, and you would have to get there before everybody else. And I was shocked. I really love it. I still think about there's this thing in the movie where they have these half floors in a building. Sometimes still think of that image at specific times and for specific reasons. But yeah, Being John Malkovich, that's my turn to the, I don't know what you'd call that, futuristic science fiction, otherism, hell if I know, just not in this realm of reality.
When you asked this question, I thought minor in film studies, started watching Hitchcock, Kubrick, those kinds of films. And I go through films one goes, I used to go through music. I'd get turned on to a particular artist and then buy everything they have and listen to all of their albums. Same sort of thing with movies is I'll get turned on to a particular director and then, purchase everything they have. So Hitchcock, Kubrick, Woody Allen, whatever you think of his life personally, he's a great storyteller. Fincher, Tarantino, Bergman, Truffaut, Fellini, all that stuff I like listening to. Or like watching rather. But what's taken me by surprise is Bollywood. I never thought that I would kind of get into that, and have seen a few Bollywood films, that and the Fast and the Furious series. And I think my son drugged me to the first one of those. That since then, it's sort of, that stupidity is addicting. So those are two areas, Bollywood and Fast and Furious, that you would never get me to admit it, but yeah, they're pretty interesting.
All right. So similar to Jen, I don't watch a lot of TV and I don't watch a lot of movies, especially. However, I'm going to take this in a different turn, and at risk of sounding completely and utterly pathetic, I'm going there. So because I don't watch much TV, my child does. And so some of the things that I normally would look the other way and be able to get something done have a habit of catching my eye. And Don has one particular picture of me where I'm very stern-faced and watching one of her Disney movies and very, very much enthralled in the plot. And he sends it to me as blackmail occasionally. And so I think that would be mine. The most surprising for me is that I get really wrapped up in her Disney movies. The most recent of which being Spirit on Netflix. It's a show for horse lovers, and all of those little 8 years and under girls. I have been so sucked in that I'm unable to look away and unable to finish watching the show until it's through. So that is mine. That has really surprised me in the past few months.
It's happening to me too, Gina.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
Definitely not. I think in the last month, Encanto played at least 10 or 12 times. And it was not because Nora was asking for it. That's all I need to say about that. But my answer is about a movie last week. So we were not feeling great as a family. It's let's pick a movie and watch together. And I let Mike picked the movie, and he picked Dora and the Lost City of Gold. And I would not have picked that movie at the same time. I asked him to pick the movie. Okay, let him have the movie. And it was really clever and entertaining, much more than I thought. It didn't make my eyes ooze out my ears or something. Like it was actually entertaining and made me laugh out loud at more points than I was expecting. So that's my answer. If that was a very unexpected little gem there.
Yeah, it's fun the way those can come up. Actually, my mom's side of the family, that's where the Transylvania Saxon genes come in, and the rest is Irish. But it was like my mom and I loved vampire movies. And I was not a huge DC Comics fan, but Blade, I really loved Blade. And when the Blade films came out with Wesley Snipes, I was just like, yes, I love this. It was like, just, they really captured it. And then as my partner was like, we should watch Twilight. I didn't know a lot about it. Robert Pattinson, I'm just saying. I started watching it and I was like, this is really good. And I got so sucked into the stories. And I get it. Yeah, it's a different ontological, epistemological platform for vampirism, but I utterly enjoyed them. And, that's that led me to The Batman, which that's a story for another podcast.
Yeah, I don't do vampires either. I should have put that on my list of the things I don't do. I don't do the books either. My mom, she'll say, there's not a lot of vampires, she'll say. Like, I don't need any vampires. Thank you very much. All right. So switching gears a little bit in tone here. What is the most challenging student disposition to remediate?
I got to tell you, and I've been in some remediations with students. Generally, it's students who get to the point where they're starting to do their prac and they just are, or they're already showing signs in our clinic of not being able to make connections with clients. They just aren't, either it's characterological or it's some type of personality disorder that prevents them and prevents this student from being able to form relationships. So we do the remediation, and the remediation might be, we're going to slow you down. We're going to get you more practice clients. And by practice clients, that generally means a faculty member will volunteer to be a client for them. And so they can, it can be videoed and reviewed and gone over with the student. But those are tough. And if you can maybe inch them or even millimeter them along a little bit, there's maybe some hope. But the idea that they're necessarily going to be ready, or you can ethically feel like they can work with clients and not wind up turning them away, it's a real challenge.
Yeah, Marty, mine is similar. For me, it's when there's no awareness, there's no self-awareness, and there's no ability to self-reflect and to see the feedback that they're being told. I think that is particularly challenging because I can say things over and over and over again, and I'm just not sure if they're being heard. And I think that is the hardest disposition for me to work with as a counselor educator, especially as students are getting towards practicum, like Marty was mentioning, and you have this fear of, how are you going to sit with a client if you can't hear the feedback that I'm giving you in this moment? So for me, that's the most challenging.
I really only had one experience truly in this area. And it's very similar actually to Gina, what you were describing, just, and actually what Marty was saying too, it was kind of that combination perhaps of having difficulty of making connections with clients and then not receiving feedback. No matter which of the 14 different ways it's presented, then it's just like, so that's the experience I had. And I can also imagine perhaps any student who just in that same kind of way lacks reflection because they think they know best. They think they know, the right way to do things. And it doesn't really matter, what anybody says or what anybody with any experience might suggest to them, because they are sure, but they're going to keep writing that and they're going to die on that hill. But, that can be really difficult because, when they think they know it, what do they have to listen to you for?
I think for me, it has been, and again, it's, rooted in my own experience. We all have a cognitive ceiling, and I'll get into rabbit holes and I'll be chasing down some research and I'll just feel myself bumping up against my cognitive ceiling. And I'm like, shite, I may not be able to grasp this. So when a student who is well-intentioned, especially a student who has resolved, metabolized, grown from their own trauma and decided, I want to take that and I want to help people. And yet their cognitive ceiling's just not, advanced enough to get to the level of graduate study. It is just heartbreaking to me because I tend, to think whatever that G, general intelligence, is. There's something there. Like all of my test scores all my life are right on the mean. I took the GRE, I got right on the mean. I did a review course, I studied. A year later, I retook it, got the exact same score. And I'm like, I think that's the cognitive ceiling. I don't think I can get beyond that, you know? And when I see it, I'm like, I wish there was something that could be done. But again, from my own experience, I'm like, there doesn't seem to be. And that's heartbreaking.
I agree with everything that I'm hearing and have found challenges around all of these. I mean, I can't even count the number of remediation committees I've probably been on with varieties of these types of things. And they typically cluster around these types of issues. I would say those who struggle to perspective take are one of the ones that trigger me. And I think it's difficult to remediate, but I think as an educator, it's particularly difficult for me because I do a lot of perspective taking, and that's something that comes very naturally to me. And so I've noticed that it's taken a lot of effort and work for me to kind of get inside and figure out like, how come they can't get it? Because that's one of the things that I would say that I pride myself on as a counselor educator, is being able to figure out why a student's not getting it. So Elliott, when you're talking about like the cognitive ceiling, like that image makes total sense to me, because sometimes people are they're up against the top of their capacity at this point in time, right? Or completely in terms of their, I don't know, intelligence or test taking skills or whatever the case may be. But when students struggle to perspective take and kind of get into I know what's right and I can't see it any other way. And there's lots of different ways it plays out. It'll play out with multicultural sometimes. Sometimes it plays out with empathy and empathy development and being able to understand the client's perspective. But those tend to be the hardest cases for me because it's difficult to link to a behavior. And I would say that that's kind of the hardest dispositions for me that are more difficult to link to behaviors. And perspective taking, we can link it to behaviors, but they're very different because there's something going on in here that we need to see coming out of here, out of the mouth. I'm pointing to my mouth right now for the listeners. And whatever goes on in between those things, we can give suggestions of what should be happening. But in terms of the person having it click, it's pretty challenging.
I've got a final question here. So my question is, how do you post-conference? What's your return to work like?
The last time that I returned post-conference to work, I was moving. I had a new house. My stuff was all over the place. And so I think for me, the most important thing when it comes to returning to work is just organization. I have to make sure that my space is clean. I have to make sure that like my clothes are clean, that everything is in its place. Maybe that's a little bit of a type A personality coming out, but everything has to be in order. So I usually come back and clean my house, clean my office, make sure everything is organized. And then I feel a little bit better about life.
It's been a while for me. A couple years, I think, since I have conferenced with a travel component to it. I tend to like to maybe do a little bit of the opposite, put my bags down and, get out the things I need for the night, but then do some DoorDash and like maybe do nothing for the rest of the evening if I traveled that day. And yeah, I like to kind of get the conference off of me a little bit and then hopefully try to get back into the routine the next day. When I can leave myself an extra day. So I have a day in between the end of a conference and maybe starting the work week or whatever you have, if possible. I like having a little bit of that break time for my brain.
Yeah, I like this question because it's shifted for me over the years. It used to be, getting back to work, getting my stuff organized, knowing where I was diving back in. But now it's almost all physical because if I'm at a conference, I'm not as active as I usually am, and my arthritic joints are locking up. And when I get back, I'm like, okay, got to deal with the physical first. And so, a couple of really good workouts, some decent food and sleep. And then, I feel like I'm kind of back on my own track again. But that's where I'm at these days.
I think I used to have FOMO with conferences of like, I've got to stay for the entire thing. And then finally, I realized that like getting back Sunday night at like 2 a.m. and then having to teach the next night just was really not working for me. So I almost have always taught on Mondays. I don't know why that is, but I've almost always for the entire time I've been a counselor educator taught on Mondays. So I try to build in a buffer day now. FOMO is gone. Like, I didn't see all at ACA or whatever, so like if I skip a conference now, it's no big deal. But even when we were going to them prior to COVID, I would come back on Saturday. I'm like, I can't do all this like rushing around on Sunday, potentially flights getting canceled or getting bumped or the connection doesn't make it. And that puts me in 12 hours late. I mean, I just couldn't do it because I would be completely wasted the rest of the week because I would have to hit the ground running completely the next day. Or I was trying to grade papers on the plane on Sunday because Lord knows you didn't do any work while you're at the conference because the conference is work, you know? So I started building in a buffer. And even if, you know, I would do my best if I could come back on Sunday and then have Monday as the buffer, I would do that. But most of the time that was impossible. And I just decided I can't like break my back because I've got FOMO and don't want to miss out on something, or somebody said I needed to be at this reception or whatever. It's like, nah, y'all will do just fine if my ass ain't there. Like it will be okay.
You know, I asked this question coming off of spending a week at the ACA conference and took everybody's advice, as it turns out. You know, Jen, I came back a day early, and my rationale was I'm on their board. I have to show up 3.5 days before everybody else has to show up for the conference. And I just can't sustain myself that whole time. Plus, you know, I'm away from home. I'm away from my spouse. I'm away from my kids, and I'm away from my job. As much as I tried to juggle both things, no. And for me, I come home and the suitcases go in the basement, and with that, the clothes go in the washer right away. And I have to kind of do this unpacking process, both physically and emotionally, to get the clothes cleaned and to get myself kind of cleared from that week experience. But then it feels like catch up. It feels like that first week back, I'm doing last week's work, I'm doing this week's work, and there's stuff that inevitably I've brought home from the conference that I have to deal with or arrange. One of the things I do is, you know, all of that gets beaten out by needing more sleep. So there's lots of naps on that extra day I have. And I choose something to eat that I had to eat in a week because I've been in a different city. So I look for some local comfort food like that DoorDash that Steph was talking about. But we're getting to the point where we're going to start getting back in conferences for those that are going. So, you know, this question was really true for me. And I think we've been through all of our questions for tonight, except a final shot question. This actually comes from Jenn, and I thought it was an interesting question for a final shot question. So what food or drink makes your stomach turn just thinking about it?
Mine is oysters. And this has a little bit of a backstory. So I was in California for my undergrad, and my girlfriend and I, we went out to eat one night at a really fancy beachfront restaurant. And we ordered one appetizer and split it because we were broke college kids. And this table next to us was two guys, and they thought we were cute. And so they ordered us an entire tray of oysters. And oysters are pretty expensive, and especially like right on this beachfront ritzy restaurant. And so they ordered us this huge tray of them. And I was like, ew, what are these things? They like look like boogers. Like, I don't know about this. So we try them because they're like, come on, try them. And so they move their chairs over. And so we try them to be polite, and we're like, oh yeah, yum. And we go through the whole entire platter. And sure enough, they order another giant platter. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm out. And now when I think of oysters, I just think of.
I had a hard time because I know that there are things out there, but what keeps popping in my head is tequila. So I'm just there. No explanation, no stories.
Yeah, for me, it's any form of, in standalone, I should say, standalone form cheese. Cheese creeps me out. It's a consistency thing. It just terrifies me. It just, no cheese.
I love everything that people have said so far, unfortunately. Sorry, y'all, especially raw oysters, one of my favorites. For me, I've got two things. One is papaya, that people always like to say, well, you'll like this one. This one's really good. And I'm a person who's open to trying new things, but I know I don't like papaya. Just the smell of it makes me want to hurl. And I get talked into it. Oh, so-and-so grew this. You're going to love it. The hell, I'm not going to love it. And I will end up spitting it in a napkin as soon as I turn my back from you. And I'm not a picky eater, by the way. The other thing is Chardonnay. Just looking at a bottle of Chardonnay in the store turns my stomach, because when I was a kid, I accidentally sipped off my aunt's glass thinking it was water. And it was some real cheap stuff, real strong and nasty. To this day, I can cook with Chardonnay, but I certainly cannot drink it.
Mine is tuna fish. I cannot stand the smell of it. Aileen and I have this agreement. I go away to conferences and I get to eat shrimp and grits or grits. She can't stand the sight of grits. When I go away to conferences or I'm out, I know she's eating tuna fish here. And it's like we're having our own separate food infidelities. And, we come back together and, the marriage still survives our food infidelities, but tuna fish. And I have to sometimes suffer through tuna fish Subway sandwiches that she wants to have, but generally we eat those in separate rooms. And so, yeah, tuna fish is it. Well, that ends on a really good stomach churning end of the show. I want to thank the squad, Jenn, Elliott, Stephanie, and Gina. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.